Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Okay, we're going to get started here, but I want to give Brad a warning, okay? So no one listened to this, but I'm giving Brad a warning. Brad, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be asking you about birth stories of heroes in ancient classical literature. Okay, so please be ready with your response, okay? Okay, so you got maybe 10, 15 minutes to get ready, and there we go. I just felt it would be fair to tell you that I'm going to expect help from you. Our calendar for today, our granddaughter's bat mitzvah is at 4:30 this afternoon at Wilshire, where for Risa and for me, it is Athena from the head of Zeus, but Roy, that's too soon. You got to wait until we're there. But in the meanwhile, it's the 8th bar bat mitzvah of 8 grandchildren. So it's really, we felt already last night kind of weird. And a whole bunch of the grandchildren were sitting around the dinner table after services, and strange reaction. Risa and I felt like observers. The next generation was yakking away and screaming and yelling and
screaming. They were screaming. They were having such a good time.
Risa, it's because our hearing is impaired.
Oh, no, they were screaming.
Okay. And for the very first time, we kind of felt like we're watching the next generation as opposed to doing our usual leading the next generation. And it was a very strange feeling. Happy, but strange. Okay. So here we are. Enough of that. It's so good to see everybody. Nobody in the waiting room. Okay. So beyond that, on January 25th, we have the noon current events thing. I am so grateful to you for your response to the Black Hebrew discussion. That turned out to be really important. And I'm glad that we were able to do it. And even though Steve isn't here, thankful to Steve for having pushed on that. And remember, if you want something discussed in the current events class, great. Just let me know, and we can easily do that. Cindy, anything coming up sisterhoodishly?
Yeah, Wednesday night we have an armchair adventure to Ukraine. It's on Zoom. You can register by going to the calendar to get the Zoom link. We'll be talking a little bit about the history, showing you some of the city's pre-war, the synagogues, the catacombs, the menorah building, Rabbi Nachman's grave, just a lot that'll be there. It's at 7 o'clock, and then at 8:15 we'll have a speaker on the current situation and its impact on the Jews. And Susie will talk about Froman's.
Okay, Susie, Froman's.
Need to unmute.
What?
Unmute.
I'm unmuting. Okay, here we go. January 27th, 6 p.m. Everybody is invited to a no-host dinner at Froman's. And if you think that you're missing out on Shabbat, in a way you are, but in a way you have something added to it. It's a different way to celebrate. We have artifacts or Judaica on the table. We have a challah, we have wine, we have prayers, and we have good schmoozing, getting to know each other. So I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible. Please RSVP. The ladies are going to be getting invitations from the synagogue, and RSVP so that I can hold a spot for you. Okay? There you
The
have
men are welcome too.
And one more thing, just one more quick thing. Look, everybody, I got my new plot, okay? My brand new plot. Rabbi, is there a blessing for a new plot?
Loud.
Blessing for the new plout.
Yeah, I'll just kiss it.
May God render us always relevant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Came yesterday.
good to see Jim Ruxin back again. We know that we're dealing with people who are dealing with some complicated issues. And Jim, I know that you are, and it's great to see you. And anything coming up?
Nothing, no film discussion tonight, but next week we'll have something very interesting and fine. I don't know what it is yet. There's just so much out there. I also have to say that on January 24th, the Oscars will be announced. And after that, the people who did not make it as nominees will release their films into mainstream platforms like Amazon Prime and Netflix. So there'll be a lot more available to us, but we have a great couple of months coming up with recent releases. So see you next Saturday. I'll send an email out to everybody on Monday.
Super. Thank you, Barbara. Good to see you. I think I said hello to everybody. No, I didn't say hello to Lynn. Okay. Okay. So I had to say hello to Lynn. Fine. Checking in. Anything? Tamara, there is a new life in your home. I don't know if she's there, but is she there? Can we see her or we can't see her? No.
No, she just fell asleep. We took a very long walk, which is why I have my hat on. It's raining. And she just crashed. Next time.
Okay, but so we're happy for that. I mean, our family is increasing. And Abby, I'm looking at you. That is such a joy. That is such a joy. Okay, so here we go. We are now in the book of Exodus, and we are in chapter 1, verse 13 of the book of Exodus. Risa, do you want to give me an exact page? Chapter 1, verse 13, that's page 300 what in the WRJ?
Wait a minute, you told me one.
I know I lied.
308.
308. Okay, so it's 2 pages off, for God's sake. Okay, so 308 in the WRJ and 347 in the Plout, and then in the new Plout that we're going to be using. Fine. Now, interesting stuff, and here Brad is going to have to start getting ready, but not quite yet. Verse 13. So we have the start of the Exodus story, and we have the start of the Israelites being in Egypt and being enslaved. And then in verse 8, a very famous quote, a new king arose over Egypt. You know, the rabbis go wild over Melech Chadash. Who was the Melech Chadash? Was he the old Melech, the old king, the old Pharaoh who had a sudden change of heart? Or was he a new? Anyway, it goes on like that. And then we get to verse 13. Well, I love verse 12. The more they were oppressed, the more they increased. When we were totally destroyed in terms of our community, we went out and had kids. So, you know, I think that's a pretty good thing. The more we were oppressed, the more we had kids. Verse 13, the Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made life bitter for them with house labor, metal bricks, and with all sorts of tasks. What's the key word? The key word is
Ruthless.
ruthless. Okay. So it's not just a question, I'm going blind from the slide. It's not just a question of imposing labor, but it's doing it ruthlessly. It's doing it in such a way that it was designed to create pain. You know, and I don't like these comparisons. I try to avoid it. But during the Nazi era, when they had Jews working as slave labor in factory plants on behalf of the Reich, some of the workers were put out into the fields to move stones from one place to the other, another, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what was the point of that? Moving boulders from one place to the other and then back. It's a
There
way
was
of,
no point.
it's a way of killing. The Hebrew word here, befarech, is really the same kind of thing. It translates as ruthlessly. But it's not just that they worked the Israelites, they worked the Israelites in such a way that eventually, hopefully, we would just all die and they would not be bothered by us. So befarech is very important. It's found obviously in the Haggadah. So the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites, befarech. They didn't just enslave them, befarech. That translates ruthlessly. I don't know about ruthlessly, but harshly, miserably, nasty. It was terrible. Vayamararu. I love that word, vayamararu. What's that stuff called on Passover when you bite into it and you cry?
Maror.
Okay, do you hear the word vayamararu? Vayamararu and maror. They marorified their lives. They embittered their lives. Okay, that's a good word. Ba'avodah kasha, with harsh work. Chomer ulevenim. This, the rabbis, and we're not going to go into it, but the rabbis go wild on trying to figure out mortar and bricks. Mortar and bricks. What was going on, mortar and bricks? One of the things that the rabbis talk about is that the Egyptians were so terrible that they even forced pregnant women to go out and do slave labor in construction. Tamara, pay attention to me and not to Tufin's baby, please. Yeah, it is cute. Okay, and they gave birth or were forced into premature labor because of the physical labor, and the babies were born and thrown into the mortar and become part of the construction. One of the things that the Midrash says, that when Pharaoh was eventually held up for judgment, the angels claimed one of the babies embedded in the structure and held it up as an example of befarech, the kind of horrors imposed upon the Israelites. So that's a mortar and bricks and all sorts of tasks in the field, which means that they did physical labor, building labor. Were they building pyramids, ladies and gentlemen?
No.
No. Okay? No, we were not building pyramids. Apparently, storehouses, other buildings, maybe a bowling alley, but it was most certainly not pyramids. So when you say, oh, the Hebrews built a pyramid, no, we didn't. Eric? You're muted, Eric. Eric, you're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I saw something funny. They didn't have good union representation when they were in Egypt because God did not sign up to be the union reps for the Israelites yet. After the burning bush, he signed on to be the trustees and the union reps for the Israelites so they can get out of Egypt and have freedom.
Okay, so we're gonna say that you have come up with an explanation that Rashi couldn't, Ibn Ezra couldn't, Ramban couldn't, nobody else could, but it's valid. Okay,
I just saw humor in that because
I see great humor in that. I see great humor.
I hope I didn't get too off topic, but I see things that are funny sometimes.
You are on topic. And we could use more union strength in this miserable world.
Mm.
Okay. Now, here we go. Brad, are you ready? Brad, are you there?
I'm here, but I doubt that I'm going to be useful, but go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I want to say Shabbat Shalom to Fern. It's been a couple of weeks and
Shabbat shalom.
and hi. So our family is like more put back together. Brad, tell me at least a little bit of what you know about the custom of having miraculous births or unique birth stories for heroes in classical literature.
Oh my gosh, unique birth stories.
Okay,
Well, I mean, in many cases, there are births that are between gods and humans. For example, there's the birth of Zeus and his siblings, who were all killed by their father, Kronos, I believe. What other, I don't know where you're going in particular, Rabbi. The question was so open-ended.
Oh, I thought it was very focused. We're going to be talking about the birth story of Moses. And I'm just trying to figure out if the birth story of Moses, and I suspect it is, fits into a pattern in which the ancients sought, I don't want to say fantastic, but unusual projected birth stories and ascribed them to their future leaders. That's all. And I think that we're going to read here is very much part of that tradition. Okay, so yeah. First of all, and we have 3 children, 8 grandchildren. Our experience indicates that most parents view their newborn children as proto-messiahs, that they're so beautiful, so perfect, so brilliant, so whatever, that obviously they're going to lead the world toward a better day. That feeling lasts until the first night the kid stays up and screams all night. But there is this feeling. Now, the story of Moses, which we're going to get into, reflects an effort by the authors of the Torah to put Moses into the same genre, to put Moses into the position of being foretold, miraculous, and so forth. Beyond that, I'm going to make a claim concerning which I have no evidence, but that has never stopped me in the past. I am going to claim that the medieval commentators wanted to create a backstory to compete with the backstory of the birth of Jesus, and that they wanted to give the Jewish messianic figure a lot of the stuff that supposedly happened to the baby in the manger and angels and all kinds of stuff. And the Christian world had the miraculous birth stories of Jesus, and the medieval commentators looked around to create a similar backstory for Moses. Part of what the commentators do is respond to their world through an examination of biblical material. So that when Rashi or Ibn Ezra come up with explanations or descriptions, they aren't just talking about what happened in Egypt. They're talking about what's going on in Europe. Does that make sense to you? That they're creating explanations which deal with their world, but framing it as if they were talking about the biblical period. We're going to see how that goes. I left something out here in the terms of Befarech. Rashi said hard work Befarech means body crushing. And that goes with what we were saying, that the hard work was designed to kill. Befarech. Then Ibn Ezra, far more practical human being, Ibn Ezra said they were so exhausted from the hard work that they didn't have the energy to have sex and couldn't have babies. And this was a good, hi, Joseph Perling. And I'm going to read your comment. Joseph Perling says, a miraculous birth is part of every culture. Campbell, whom I love, Joseph Campbell, wrote on this. Yes, yes, and yes, yes. If you haven't read Joseph Campbell, Hero, was it With a Thousand Faces? I think A Hero with a Thousand Faces. Joseph Campbell, Hero of a Thousand Faces or whatever, is a book. I hate to say you must, but I urge you to read. It is critically important for understanding how the biblical stories fit into world literature. Okay, but I wanted to get that. Okay. Now, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was Shiphrah and the other Puah. Have you ever heard these people before? Maya, you're saying yes. I mean, where did you hear? I am looking at your head waving. Shiphrah and Puah, first mentioned here, become heroes of Jewish feminism. You will find Shiphrah and Puah mentioned every time a Jewish feminist writes upon feminist strains in Jewish thought and life. These are, I don't want to say heroines, these are heroes, these are massively important people, and we don't know who they are. But the rabbis knew. Shiphrah was Yocheved, and Puah was Miriam. Who was Yocheved?
Moses' mother.
You got it.
Oh, and
Who was
also
Miriam?
His sister.
Moses' sister. Excuse me. You're writing me beautiful cue cards. This was what Siegel and Schuster based the Superman story. They put the rocket ship from Krypton is a representative of the ark that Miriam put Moses in, and the Moses to save his life.
And you are so correct. And Stan Lee and the creators of the comic and so forth, Jewish, and they embedded Jewish elements in the story of Superman that is well documented. So
And also, I go to Comic-Con sometimes, and they have superhero costumes and everything as a tribute to the story of Moses, unconsciously.
So there we are. Now, were Shiphrah and Puah really Yocheved and Miriam? No. We don't know who they were. But the rabbis wanted to identify them because they were so important. If you are looking for, and we do, great examples, models of women controlling the destiny of the Jewish people, you have Miriam. You have Shiphrah and Puah. They are of a type. They are leaders of the Jewish future, defenders of the Jewish present. They are women, and they are powerful. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. The Hebrew, Vayomer Melech Mitzrayim lam yaladot ha'ivriot. The rabbis will argue It's the same question with Miriam and Yocheved. Were they assigned midwives to the Hebrews, or were they Hebrews who were midwives? And the rabbis will argue, and it's going to be fruitless to try to solve it. When I read the Hebrew, I don't know. I read it as they were Hebrews. To me, it looks like Hebrews. I don't know if people read it differently. Vayomer Melech Mitzrayim lam yaladot ha'ivriot. If Ivriot Hebrews is modifying midwives, they're Hebrews. But we don't know that. Penina. Not hearing you, Penina. Not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The word shifra, leshaper, it's to make somebody's life better.
Yes.
Shua, it's the sounds that the baby makes. They were midwives. The idea is not if they were Hebrews or not. The idea is that they believe in the Hebrew symbol of religion right now at the time, Elohim. And they were fearing Elohim, which was at the time a new concept probably, otherwise they wouldn't have mentioned it. So they believed in that, okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. The pyramids, doesn't matter.
No. Let that be. That's a point. That's a very important point.
But I want to also say that it's not important that the pyramids were built later. The idea of what they were building at the time was the same idea of the purpose of the pyramids. It's to bury the dead kings, because they believed in the dead. The kings were
Penina, with respect.
Just to put the dates correctly, it doesn't matter when they were built. It's the idea the same. Okay. Now we can continue.
With respect, you're wrong.
Okay.
And they were building storehouses. It makes it very clear. Storehouses are
according to the rabbis. They call that arei miskenot. Misken is somebody who is poor, who is suffering.
Okay, you're doing commentary. I love commentary.
No, I'm depending on the Hebrew story of what I'm reading.
Okay, that's fine. Everyone but Penina agrees that they were building storehouses. That doesn't mean everybody is right and Penina is wrong.
Storing what?
Okay, got it. We're moving on. That's fine. And do you think that Jewish commentary is a blood sport? The answer is yes. One of the first book burnings in the history of the Jewish people was what? When the opponents of Maimonides burned his books. Jewish opponents of Maimonides burned Maimonides' books. So we are proud to say that one of the first instances of book burning in Jewish history was when Jewish opponents of Maimonides burned his books. I think that's disgusting, but nevertheless true. And there we are. So yes, commentaries a blood sport. Not only that, there are schools of commentaries. And if you go to the Litvakischer school, which from my point of view is the correct school, the Litvakischer, the Lithuanian method of interpretation, far more elegant, sophisticated, intellectual than the messy stuff created by the Hasidic commentaries in Eastern.
What about the archaeological findings?
Okay, I am so prejudiced that I'm embarrassed. But in any event, commentary is a blood sport, and people really disagree. We're going to go forward. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Puah, whoever they were, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let him live. What is self-defeating about Pharaoh's order? Harf.
He gets rid of the labor force.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. So Pharaoh is getting rid of his future labor force. And when economists look at this thing, they're saying, what was he thinking? You know, why would you do that? And, you know, they give reasons, but yes, it is a very interesting problem. If it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. Later on, Pharaoh expresses through his advisors what's really going on. These Israelites are growing in number. They could join our enemies and rise up against us. So Pharaoh was desperately afraid of what his own policies were creating. He oppressed them, forced them into labor, gave them no future, and their response was to have children. And the more he oppressed us, the more kids we had. That's in the text. So Pharaoh's wonderful scheme to wipe us out, in fact, led to a different result. I have mentioned before, but one of the miracles of Jewish life was the birth rate from 1945 to 1947-48 among the Jews who survived in Europe. The only rational, logical, useful response they could have to what the world and they experienced was to have children. 1945 to 1947 was one of the highest birth rate periods in modern Jewish life. Okay, it's okay.
Rabbi?
I'm sorry? Oh,
Rabbi,
sure.
I just wanted to share that I went to a town in Italy that was taken over by the Americans after the war. It was a seaside town where a lot of Italians had second homes, and they commandeered the town. They kicked out the Italians from their second homes, and they brought in refugees from the DP camps. And during that, and they brought them there to live, to be rehabilitated, to receive medical care, vocational training, and most of all, to marry and have children. And that's what happened during those first few years. It was a rather extraordinary effort. And then the people were not kept in Italy. They were sent out to different countries that would accept them. But that's precisely what happened. And I'm one of those babies.
Oh.
Not from that DP camp, from a German DP camp, but having babies is what the survivors were intent on doing.
You tell a great story. You tell the story objectively, then the last line is, oh, by the way, I'm one of those babies. Yes. Yeah. That's thank God for that. Okay. So here we have that story grabbed me. Forgive me. I'm going to move on in a minute. Okay. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt told them. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt, some of them said, why have you done this thing? And the midwives, verse 19, this is one of the famous rationalizations in all of literature. So Melech Mitzrayim, Pharaoh called them, and they said, Ki lo chanashim hamitzriot ha'ivriot. These Jewish women are not like normal Egyptian women. They're not. And what does that mean? Ki chayotena. They're like animals. chayot. They're like animals. They're like animals. Before a midwife can reach them, they gave birth. What a great story, right? And I don't know exactly how you combat that story, but that's the way they did it. So these two women, whoever they were, enabled the Jewish people to survive. Okay, but we're going to go to a particular people. And God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied, and God established households. The end of verse 21. That's a very important phrase. What's the most precious gift God could give to midwives? That they were privileged to establish families and to see a family grow families of their own. The midwives established batim, houses, bayit. They were allowed to establish batim. And Pharaoh charged the people, saying, every boy that is born, throw into the Nile. So this was Pharaoh trying to side. Oh, don't cry, baby, don't cry. Pharaoh trying to establish what it was he wanted. Before we move to the birth of Moses, coming up now, any questions? This is the situation. Okay, so I see Kevin. Kevin, it's so good to see you. Hi.
Hi. Okay, back to where was it? Verse 17. The midwives fearing God. At this point, God hasn't done anything to have the midwives fear him. I'm just wondering if they believed in the Pharaoh's gods or they actually believed in their own gods, but there was nothing to fear at that point.
The Hebrew requires feared. They somehow knew and feared, which would be not fear in terms of terror, but they worshiped. They treated the God of the Israelites as God. I don't think it's possible, because it is debatable, to go beyond that. What has God done for them? Precious little. Were the people, the slaves in Egypt, worshiping the God of Israel? That's a question, and I don't quite know the answer to it. Tamara, do you want to pop in on this? It's
No, it doesn't say. It almost seems as if they don't know. I mean, they may worship, they may revere a power, but not necessarily have any knowledge of their own tradition and who this God is, which is why when God meets Moses, God explains to Moses what he has to tell the Israelites. It's as if God is being introduced not only to Moses, but to the people. But I think reverence or fear of God was a universal experience in the ancient world. There wasn't such a thing as a secular society.
So what you're saying is God-fearing doesn't necessarily mean the Jewish or Hebrew version of God.
No, what I mean is God-fearing in general does not mean that, but in this story, the implication, because the word Elohim is used, the writer wants us to think they believed in Israel's God, right? But how much most of the people, most of the Israelites knew about that God, we have no information.
No information at all. Okay, I see Ray, and then I see Marina, then I see Risa. Okay.
Thank you. I have really a question for anybody who might be able to help here. I'm confounded by that verse 21, this translation, and God established households for the midwives. And I'm trying to reckon this into something a little bit more concrete, because typically, to my mind, when God establishes something, it's like a gourd grows over Yonah. It's something that is a natural phenomenon, but a household is not a natural phenomenon. It is something that is created typically by human agency. So I'm confounded by 2 points. Number one, what are these households exactly? What does that look like, if we know? And number two, what do we infer actually happens to bring them into being? I will guess through some sort of human agency.
Okay, I'm not going to be, I mean, you're doing commentary work, Ray, and that's great. It says established households. The tradition will indicate that these people, Chevra and Pua, in fact, had descendants. They were established as a living family within the community. And beyond that, except to say that perhaps they viewed the establishing of such families as a blessing. I'm sorry, I can't go past that unless someone has anything to add specifically to this point. Specifically, Penina, to this point. Not hearing you, Penina. Not hearing you.
Okay, now?
Okay, what to this point? What can you say?
Yes. The whole idea is that there was a new social justice developing. And that's why they have an emphasis of saying they feared God. They used to sacrifice human. They used to sacrifice
establishing a household.
Yes, and these people cherished life. So it wasn't to sacrifice, to kill the kids, to sacrifice them to the gods. No, now they cherish life. There is a new concept here. And that's why they say they fear Elohim.
Okay, fine. You're not talking about the question that was raised, but I don't know.
Yes, there was a whole new social justice developing there. Moses asking the people the person that he killed, why are you hurting your friend? It shows you already compassion to human life. That new concept of social justice began to establish itself among the Hebrews. That's why they were
Marina, please.
I wanted to address the previous issue about the midwives fearing God. I am not based on any knowledge except for the text that we are reading, but Joseph and his brothers were following their father's faith or traditions, and they were distinctly different from Egyptians who abhorred the Hebrews. So it seems to me that there were some religious beliefs that the midwives could have followed.
Exactly.
On the matter of family, it was possible that the midwives, being employed women in a way, did not have families normally, but these two were rewarded, but having also families of their own.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Risa. Did you have your hand up, Risa? I thought
I
so.
did, but I pulled it down because it was repetitive.
Okay, cool. Thank you. We are moving forward because I want to get to this. I'm going to get to this just because I found it fascinating. At the top, on chapter 2, verse 1, a certain member of the house of Levi went and married a woman of Levi. To be able to tell you what the rabbis did with this verse is so much fun. Who was the husband in this case? Amram, right? And the woman, Yocheved. What does it mean? A certain member, a man of the house of Levi took a daughter of the house of Levi. The rabbis, they were already married. Amram and Yocheved were married. When Pharaoh issued his decree, they divorced. They went apart. And now, out of a conviction that what they had done wrong was wrong, they remarried so as to have children. Now, I ask you, who put the bee in their bonnet that they should remarry? Miriam. How do we know that? We assert it. And that makes it true. I certainly have done that in arguments. If I say it strongly enough, it makes it right. Oh, hi, Shelley. Good to see you. See, Maya, we traded you for Shelley. Okay, now, the rabbis say that Miriam addressed her parents and said, "You're worse than Pharaoh." Which, if I were Yocheved and Miriam, I might take umbrage at that. You're worse than Pharaoh. What do you mean? Pharaoh wants to kill all the boys. By not having children, you're not allowing boys and girls to come into the world. So you are worse than Pharaoh. And it was when Miriam said that to Yocheved and to Amram that they remarried. And shortly thereafter, Moses was born. Aaron and Miriam were children of the first marriage. Moses is the product of the remarriage. Now, the rabbis want to figure out how this happened. If you are interested in genealogy, read the Rashi and Ibn Ezra in these sections. They figure out how old Yocheved and Amram were when this happened. Surprise. According to the rabbis, Yocheved was 130 years old. Cindy, don't shake your head at me. I'm doing the best I can here. 130 years old.
I think they counted differently.
Okay. But what about the male part of the bargain? A miracle occurred. By the way, I am seeking replication of that miracle. Amram was restored to youthful vigor. I don't know how you could buy into that blessing, but I'm applying. Okay, Tamara?
Yeah, I love the Midrashim, but I'd like to highlight something in the text when they say Levite married a Bat Levi, a daughter of Levi, and doesn't give her name. It's the beginning of a story about daughters. There's a daughter of Levi, there is their daughter, and then there is a daughter of Pharaoh. And the whole story revolves about the power, the ingenious power of daughters who are normally the lowest in the socioeconomic totem pole and always under someone's authority. And yet the revolution in Egypt and the real beginning of the Exodus begins with daughters who have been underestimated and who, in fact, are able to undo everything that Pharaoh has put in place to kill the Hebrews. So it's a great story about daughters and granddaughters.
Oh, I am so wary of making any
comment.
I am gonna fine, and it's there. So it does say Bat Levi, right? She's there, a daughter of the Levites. Yes, she has that role. And by the way, I'm not sensitive, but did you hear the implied criticism of Midrash is good, but let's look at
the text.
I mean, did you hear that? I mean, I felt the knife move into my back and pull out so smoothly that I almost didn't notice. Okay, but the text says what Tamara says it says.
It's not either or, it's both. It's a living tradition. I didn't imply this, it's just I wanted to highlight the daughters. I love the Midrashim on this story.
Yeah, and all I know is Effie is feeling very happy. So then I know I'm in trouble if Effie is happy. But it says Bat Levi, and Tamara is saying, pay attention to that. Because here we have women moving into functional leadership, significant roles in the shaping of Jewish history. And yes, I did miss that. Okay, yes, I did miss that. I was just so happy about Amram being restored to his youthful vigor. That was that the rabbis. I have so much good stuff here right now, it's killing me. But the rabbis say not only was Miriam responsible for getting her parents to start having kids again, but they had a remarriage. And the rabbis take the time to describe how Miriam danced at their wedding, at their remarriage.
I have a question for Tamara. Why is the text translated in the women's commentary a woman of Levi when it says Bat?
Actually, the translation is not, it's the same as the plow. The translation was not created by the
authors,
by the commentator. The press used the existing translation.
So it says a woman, that my plow says a member of the house of Levi went and married a woman of Levi.
Yeah,
well,
that's
overlooking the subtlety of the text that really emphasizes daughter. I mean, it does mean the same thing. He married a Levite woman, but the way the text puts it, it doesn't say Isha from
Isha.
It's not saying a Levite woman, it's saying a daughter in Hebrew.
I'm gonna have to end. Rebecca, has a question, and then I want to tell a story about wheat, and then we'll end. Please, Rebecca.
Why would Miriam and Aaron's parents remarried? Or they got divorced, separated? What happened?
Rebecca, it's not in the text, it's in the Midrash, and the Midrash is that they separated. Now, divorce is a funny word because, it's a technical term. But the rabbis say they were separated. And then some of the rabbis say they were remarried. And at the wedding, Miriam danced. By the way, that's the first time Miriam danced. She danced again when?
Crossing the Dead Sea.
Crossing
the Red Sea.
Crossing the Red Sea. Miriam is a very fancy dancer. Now,
so maybe it was a recommitment. They recommitted to each other.
They had a recommitment ceremony. Now, this is so rich and so wonderful. How come it doesn't simply say Amram married Yocheved again? Why didn't you just do that? And now I will tell you what Rashi says. If you plant only wheat year after year, you will weaken the produce. Translation. Yocheved was the sister of Amram's father. I'm not going to be able to say how we got to that. That is the declared relationship. And in that declared relationship, the medieval rabbis don't like marriages of proximal relatives. And so they try to push her away from being immediate family and publicizing it, because in their day, going back to what I said earlier, the rabbis were fighting the problems of their day through the commentaries they wrote about the Bible.
That's what it is.
And what they were trying to say is, don't marry near relatives. You'll end up with weak wheat, which means pointy-headed kids, or whatever it is. Okay, Brad, you're going to get the last word before we move on, please.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just wanted to real quickly circle back to the issue you raised at the very beginning about the birth of Moses being in the classical tradition, the tradition of a classical hero.
Yes.
And there's one major sticking point, and that is that Homer defines very succinctly a hero as a speaker of words and a doer of deeds, an orator and a warrior, a speaker of words and a doer of deeds. And what about Moses as a speaker of words? That's open for a bit of a discussion.
I thank you for that. I am not aware of that Homeric quote. A lot could be said. A real hero has to be more than someone who fights in a battle. By the way, not every military general who became a president of the United States was an orator, a speaker, a politician in that ordinary sense. And I guess a real hero not only leads by deeds, but by words, not just by words, but with deeds. I thank you for that. I'm going to have to, that's good. That's very good. And believe me, Brad, by the time I'm through, I'm going to find a way to make Moses a man who also delivered speech. Okay? Because I got to stick with the winners, and Moses is my guy. And so I'm going to defend him, correctly or not. When thank you. that was good. I'm going to leave us all with planting wheat in the same field is a bad thing. And if you hold on to that, folks, this has been good. We're gonna join now in Kaddish, and thank you for today and all the stuff that I have about when Moses was born. The house was filled with light. When Moses was born, his voice was the voice of a young man, not an infant. When Moses was born, almost immediately, within the first 3 months, his limbs were as strong and as supple as a young adult male. When Moses was born, there's so much here. He was put into a basket. And where was the basket put?
In the river.
So there were narrow-minded Jewish thinkers who said, Pharaoh said all Jewish babies were to be thrown into the Nile. Pharaoh didn't say I could put him in an ark first. So, I mean, there's stuff out there which I had never thought of that. Okay, so when Yocheved put Moses in this little ark, she was fulfilling Pharaoh's command. We're going to go on to Kaddish. You got to love this. Okay, we're going to go to Kaddish. Those who have passed away during the past month: Seymour Cantor, Roger Ensign, Manley Burton Feinstein, Sean Gose, Larry Levine, Sarah Del Riskin, Stanley Stogel. Yorksites that occurred during the past week: Bertha Adishek, Fanny Ball, Paul Baum, Sharon Neufeld Bell, Anna Bendit, Norman Berkowitz, Ron Berman, Donald Bernstein, Morton Bernstein, Milton Bick, Ervil Bortz, Julius Bransky, John Brewer, Knud Bro, Chester Brown, Patricia Ann Brooks, Brian Burns, Joseph Caden, Morris Clayman, Al Cohn, Thomas Combs, Eleanor Complin, Michael Corwin, Benjamin Elkanan, Estelle Ellison, Sid Engelman, Rosalie Jean Epstein, Beverly Feinstein, Erwin Feinstein, Julius Feldstein, Natalie Furman, Barnetta Finkel, Ruth Friedman, Robert Garber, John Gaylord, Goldie Gelfand, Celia Gelman, Maurice Getz, Jay Glazer, Hilda Gluck, Daniel Goldman, Manya Goldman, Jacques Gorecki, Miriam Louise Greenberg, Abraham Greenfeld, Jacob Heyman, Jerry Hosband, Ann Hamrill, Henry Henningson, Cecile Barnett Hilfman, Isidore Lesman, Bernice Janowski, Sarah Jarris, Gail Johnson, Alan Jonas, Jeanette Paul Keene, Jerry Kleinman, Louis Konitz, Carol Beth Korn, Jerry Lawrence, Arnold Lorber, John Marion, Parkinson, Doris Michaels, Geraldine Naft, Sylvia Natker, Hetty Orden, Hinda Porter, Ruth Raup, Helen Raymond, Abram Ribicoff, Samuel Roddy, Lisa Ann Rose, Ida Rosenbaum, Regina Ross, Sam Rubin, Judith Ruderman, Eleanor Sattinger, Sally Schlossberg, Estelle Schwartz, Arlene Shapiro, Ann Sharp, Bennett Silberstein, Sarah Smook, Jeanette Snyder, Barry Solomon, Gerald Stark, Erwin Stein, Barbara Taub, Jane Trainen, Julio Wall, Catherine Wallen, Maxine Warren, Fern Weber, Nathan Weissman, Elaine Westheimer, Jack Wexler, Jesse White, Rosalie Witz. If there are any other names to be mentioned, I ask that you speak them out loud now or speak them in your hearts. I apologize for mispronunciations. We remember as well all those who died in defense of the United States, those who died in defense of the state of Israel, those who died through acts of senseless terror. We remember all the teachers of our people. We join in Kaddish. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Meirabah, Yalma, Yamlich, V'chayechon, Uvyomech, V'chayechon, Beit Yisrael, V'agala, Bizman Karit, Yehi Pnei, Mavarach, Le'olam Le'omed, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ar, Yisravan, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalah, Shmei, Le'elam, Le'elam, V'shirata, Tushpachata, V'nechem, Damiran, Imruam, V'heshlam Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chayim, I'll call Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Shalom Bimromav,
Uya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu, I'll call Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
We remember as well at this time Abraham Joshua Heschel. His yahrzeit is around this period, and this class devoted to Torah study, of course, remembers Abraham Joshua Heschel. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for that. And
Shabbat Shalom.
have a great week. See you all next week. Okay? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom. See you tomorrow, Barbara. Susie. Howard.